What is up, fellow MCU fans? Hope you're all doing well, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Aaron Taylor Johnson reprising an MCU role, or rather rejoining the MCU in some sort of manner, and what we can possibly expect here. So let's get right into it. Now, if the name doesn't ring a bell, Aaron Taylor Johnson, he did play Quicksilver in the MCU. I'm not talking about the WandaVision Quicksilver, I'm talking about the Age of Ultron Quicksilver, who got kind of shot and died. So anyway, that's beyond the point. The fact is that he's apparently being casted in an upcoming Marvel or Sony Spider-Man movie as KRAVEN the Hunter. And because I really doubt Marvel and the MCU, Disney and Marvel themselves, I don't think they would recast an actor that's already been in some of their movies, or one of their movies rather. It just doesn't really line up and doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like taking Chris Evans, who we all know and love as Captain America, and then finally bringing the Fantastic Four into the MCU and having him play the Human Torch like we saw in those earlier Fantastic Four films in the earlier years. Part of it just wouldn't exactly work, it just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, but then there's this whole other spectrum of things and theories and thoughts that we can put into this. So there's two things I'm taking away from this as of right now. Number one, Exhibit A, is that much like the Venom movies, this is purely just pretty much Sony, and it's taking place in their own universe and spectrum of things. It's just Sony over there doing their things. Yeah, that's Exhibit A. Exhibit B would be that it is the multiverse and it is actually connected to the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the MCU. So rather than having him become Quicksilver, there's an alternate timeline or parallel or multiverse where he becomes KRAVEN the Hunter instead, which also kind of plays into that whole spectrum of things of the What If series that we're getting later on this year. It's just kind of one of those things, it's a what if almost. So as of right now, many of these sources here that are actually talking about it and covering this whole story is saying that this is supposed to be a solo movie and not connected to the MCU, and it's supposed to be purely for Sony Pictures in a solo spin-off KRAVEN the Hunter movie, which seems pretty cool to me, quite honestly. Despite it not connecting to the MCU or any spectrum of that, it still is always fun to see a spin-off movie of a superhero. So many fans, including myself, were thinking that other actors could play KRAVEN the Hunter in the MCU, which would be Keanu Reeves, who many people would really like to have KRAVEN Hunter be played by, including myself, as that's specifically for the MCU over there. So would a solo movie of maybe an earlier adaptation of KRAVEN the Hunter in his earlier years of KRAVEN the Hunter versus Spider-Man as a solo movie being played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, I really do think that would be a pretty cool idea, a pretty good way to go, and I think it would honestly kind of bring some redemptions towards Sony in some manners. I mean, yeah, many people, including myself, they do like the Venom movies. They think they're pretty cool, despite them not taking place in the MCU or connecting towards the MCU. I think that those films do fairly well, and a lot of fans really do enjoy them. Furthermore, rather than just having a Peter Parker Spider-Man, which would be incredibly difficult to probably cast in some manners, I'm not completely sure what their contract deal is as of right now because it got changed around a couple of times, but it could possibly be Tom Holland's Spider-Man, which would kind of add some confusion, quite honestly. Now, don't get me wrong, in that whole idea and spectrum of things as well, I think if they were to have Spider-Man in this movie, which it would only make sense for them to have Spider-Man in this movie because it's KRAVEN the Hunter and he's one of the main villains for Spider-Man, so not having, you know, Peter Parker's Spider-Man in the movie just wouldn't make sense. But if they were to do that and have Spider-Man in the movie, I think it would be the best option to have Tom Holland portray him. It just, of course, would add confusion, I guess, towards what's the MCU, what's not the MCU in that manner of things. I think a recasting of our Spider-Man that we all know and love as Tom Holland, it just wouldn't feel right, and it would take away, I think it would devalue from this solo movie. I mean, right now, from what we're hearing right now, it sounds like it's set up to be pretty good, actor-wise and all of that. It sounds pretty good. However, here's the other thing that could possibly play out into things, and yes, I'm going into depth about this, but they could possibly introduce a Miles Morales Spider-Man in this solo film as well. I think it would work, and I think it would be really awesome. Of course, there haven't been any really rumored castings or anything for him yet, but I have been dying to see Miles Morales in the MCU for like the last 2 years nearly. Me being a really big fan of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that movie was absolutely awesome, and I think Sony did an amazing job with that one. So having Miles Morales brought into live action for one thing, and then having him brought into the MCU, the cinematic universe, and kind of having him semi-introduced into this film, I think it would really work, and I think it would be really awesome. Here's where I'm going into a little crazy, a little more into it. It's gonna sound a little crazy, but what if, this is just a what if, a theory, a prediction, something I would really love to see happen. Of course, I'd love to go more in depth about this into a whole nother separate video as well, of course, guys, so do be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss that. This here is really just giving you guys an overview of what I think could possibly play out into No Way Home, and it would have this movie come out, I guess, in some spectrum of things, or maybe even later on in a Spider-Man 4 or 5 if they do decide to do that. Maybe it's a different actor or whatnot, which once again would be really weird and just probably wouldn't work. I think a lot of fans would go against that and probably even furthermore boycott the movie. However, depending on when this movie comes out, which sounds like probably 2022, kind of down the road, coming out after No Way Home. However, what if in a future Spider-Man movies 4 or 5, possibly if we do get those, we have a young Peter Parker awake from a dream after having this as a nightmare? This movie would technically be a nightmare or a dream and wouldn't actually happen. Of course, it sounds kind of generic, but I really do think it would be really awesome, and it would kind of heal that relationship between Sony and Marvel and their two different styles of movies, and the way Sony doesn't like to have things incorporated into the MCU and vice versa. This way, we would be able to kind of have that bond, I guess, between the two different companies and corporations. Furthermore, that dream isn't just completely useless. That movie isn't completely useless. That Miles Morales actor I mentioned before, we would later on see in Spider-Man 4 or 5. So in other words, it would be kind of foreshadowing, and we would kind of have a sense and kind of know that this is going to happen, that Miles Morales will show up sometime in that Spider-Man 4 or 5. I think it would be a really cool idea. It's just a theory or a prediction, of course. And of course, I'd really like to go more in depth into it and exactly what we could possibly see. So of course, hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you're notified when that video does come out. Check out our Instagram, Unofficial MCU, for more Marvel related content, and drop a like on this video if you did enjoy it, as it really does help out the channel. Oh yeah, and of course, go comment down below your thoughts and opinions and some of your predictions and theories for this casting of Aaron Taylor Johnson. I love to hear your thoughts and opinions. And until next time, peace out.